was to shoot it so that the head, the eye, the bill are all sharp, which this one is, and then I just wanted it to melt away after that. Once I kind of saw how they were flying in the areas they were flying through, I was able to change my position to take advantage of it. All right, and welcome everybody to another wildlife-inspired episode. Your host, Scott Keys, and today I'm doing another episode where it's 10 images, and my special guest today is going to be Colin Franks. Colin, go ahead and say hello.
Hello, everybody.
All right, and I will tell you a little bit about Colin. I'm going to let him introduce himself in a minute. I've actually got his Instagram page up here, and as he's doing his bio, I will run through a couple of his accounts. I'll show you his website as well. I ran into Colin, and just as a reminder, this is a live show. So we're recording this live. The audience is live. I love audience participation. So please, if you've got questions for Colin, let us know. One of the things I like about this show format and having different people on is it's not just about the images. We may get into things like gear or workflow or, past experience. And feel free to ask questions about anything. One of the things that I'm trying to do with this show is show a lot of different perspectives. So a lot of different styles. Colin's style, I would say, is a little bit different than mine. And he does a lot of bird photography. So I think you'll pick up on some of that when you look at some of his images, and there may be some overlap in our styles as well. Before I let Colin say hello, I also just want to thank everybody for your support, both on the Wildlife Inspired channel and on my personal channel. If you don't know, I do have a personal channel on YouTube under S Keys Images. It's much, much, much different than this. I do more like product reviews, things I don't want on this site. So you can go ahead and subscribe and check that out as well. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Colin. And Colin, go ahead and say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, hey, Scott. Unfortunately, I can't talk right now. I just got word of a rare bird in my area, so I got to go get some pictures.
Okay. Goodbye. Thanks.
See you.
This was fun.
Yeah, no, like we were talking earlier, I've had a really bad flu bug the last 2.5 weeks, and it's left me with a persistent cough. So I've got a great big pile of cough drops sitting here in front of me. So hopefully I can get through without coughing into the microphone.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine.
I live just outside of Victoria, BC, Canada, on Vancouver Island. It's not a small island. It's 500 kilometers long, or 300 miles. And it's, so large that it often just doesn't feel like an island. It feels like the mainland. But born and raised here, and it's pretty good for birds. We do have some slow times, but I've been into photography, I guess, about, 10 or 12 years. Before that, I was consumed by the sport of cycling. I was into both road and mountain biking for all that time and had a lot of fun with that, a little bit of racing and a lot of big epic rides.
I've actually got a picture of you up now. I'm going to show, because you mentioned the cycling, and I had a couple images that you'd shared with me. This is like, is this in Italy?
Yeah, the road one is in Italy,
Yep.
and the mountain bike one is here at home.
Okay, and I'll show the mountain bike to the team now. So how long were you into the cycling?
20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, it's, I just basically have tapered off of that almost altogether. Photography's just taken over my life. I love it so much. But anyway, that's okay. That was a chapter of my life. I think it's good to mix things up and do different things. I don't want to get to the end of my life and look back and realize I just did one thing my whole life. So
yeah, and
the type of riding too that I did was, usually with groups, and the groups were so fast that you basically have to ride all the time, all year, slog it out through the winter, go hard, and almost be a slave to it in order to keep up. Otherwise, you'll just get dropped. And I just, I did that for so long. I guess if I hadn't discovered photography, I'd probably still be doing it, but photography has taken over.
Yeah. I'm showing some of your work. I'm going to just flip through some images up on the screen just to kind of show people the diversity you have in your portfolio. So it's not all about birds. I've see some, there's automotive work here. You've done some travel photography. Certainly, I think birds. I don't see a lot of other wildlife. So is your focus really primarily birds?
Yeah, that's right. Um, the other stuff you're talking about there is sort of just street and cultural photography, which I really, really like too. And the three best places on the planet, I think, for that are the three places I've been to: Cuba, India, and just a year ago in Morocco. And I just love doing that. I was on some back streets in India, out in the middle of nowhere, and you just meet people and you get all these really cool shots. And it's like a candy store there. I can walk around Victoria all day long and not really find anything to
Right.
shoot. But there, it's just like you take 5 steps and there's 10 more things to shoot. It's just like it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Um,
You've got a silhouette here that I had up. Let me pull this back up because it was so impressive. It's one of the first ones on the India scene, and it's a camel with the sun. It's a silhouette. And what a
oh
gorgeous
yeah,
image.
yeah, that was out in the Tar Desert. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, do you
we
find?
went
Go
all
ahead.
through the Rajasthan area.
Do you find, like I'm looking at the composition in some of your work. So obviously, this is something you take pretty seriously. Is this a self-taught uh, adventure for you?
Yep, for sure. It's been a crescendo of learning. I look back on my early stuff and I cringe.
Yeah.
It's probably true for
We all
everybody,
do,
but
yeah.
but yeah, it's a hobby for a living. I'm a graphic designer of sorts. I run my own sign business, and I've been doing that for like 30 years. So I guess that sort of living and breathing with design, layout, composition, all that sort of
Hmm.
stuff really does help when it comes to photography. There's some overlap there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Terrific. So I'll tell you what, let's jump right in. I think what we'll try to do is as we get through some of these images that you've selected as your top 10, we're going to certainly jump back into these concepts of maybe how you do things, and we'll talk about gear a little bit. Everybody always likes to know about gear. So let's just get right into it. On these birds, as we pull them up, since all 10 images today are going to be birds, we have some range maps as well. So this will kind of show where Colin's going to be in Vancouver Island. We'll get to see kind of where these images are. So I'll let you know which image I've got up on the screen, Colin, and then you could tell me a little bit about it. And if there's a story behind it or why it's special to you, let us know. So I've got the pileated woodpecker up now,
Oh, okay. Yeah, the one where he's chipping away at the
hammering
pole.
away.
Yeah. I've got a lot of shots of those, but that was pretty cool to get him caught in the act like that. He was just destroying that piece of wood.
Yeah, yeah.
They're about the size of a crow, for those who don't know, um, and they have a very very loud call. But I find that unlike most birds, they're quite approachable. I've been quite close to them at times. They don't seem to be too skittish. One really fascinating thing about all woodpeckers, I guess, is the way that their brain uh, has like a suspension. That's why they don't suffer concussions when
Hmm.
they're smashing away at wood like that. And people can just Google that. Why don't woodpeckers get concussions? You'll see diagrams of how this thing wraps around their brain. It's quite something.
Yeah, it's a fascinating species, and while you're saying they're not too skittish, I don't know. You must have a different subspecies because the ones near me, I agree that they're not skittish, but they're elusive to me. They just seem to always want to be on the other side of the tree. I can never get a good look at them, and I've seen 5 or 6. One day I had 5 or 6 kind of in the same geographic area within a couple miles, and I just could not get a chance to photograph it. So.
Hmm.
I'm going to pull up this burrowing owl. Now, first of all, are all of these images taken in your home? Because burrowing owl, let me pull up the range map. Burrowing owl would be a stretch for you up there.
Yeah, no, you're right. It would be. That was just down in Washington State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Referring back to my website, there's one album called The Palouse,
Hmm.
and the Palouse is a very, very magical area in the southeast corner of Washington State. I'd recommend it highly for anybody who's into landscapes. It's just like the land of Lilliput. It's amazing. You can Google images on that. And so I got these burrowing owls on the way there. Um, they're quite comical.
So when you took this image, this was not your necessarily your destination.
Correct.
Interesting. And this one, I love how he's just peeking over this. Is this a rock, I guess, or is it like the foreground there?
Yeah, this was actually out in an area of, you know, flat farming fields. And what that was a concrete irrigation ditch. And that's where they nest. They'll always try to find something that they can burrow under and nest and dig a hole. And that's where they all hung out.
Interesting. I may have known. I think I've heard. I wonder if it's the same spot because I know a couple photographers up in that area, and I wonder if this is the same area. These burrowing owls, they will use different areas to nest in. You'll even see part of habitat restoration. People are building areas to try to encourage them, I guess, to nest in those sites. I ran into one, I think, in not Utah, in Las Vegas, where they were installing some man-made type nests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they can be found too up in certain areas of southern BC on the mainland, but certainly not here on Vancouver Island.
Yeah. Let's talk about this red tail. I assume this is a juvenile red tail in a rainstorm, in the berries with the little water droplets all over. Tell me about this one.
Oh, you just stole my thunder.
Oh, okay.
No, yeah, that was actually, I was driving down the highway, not far out of Victoria, and I saw him sitting there. So I threw the anchors out and pulled over and backed up. And I was lucky. I find red-tail hawks to be very, very shy. Can rarely get near them. And he just sat there, and from my vehicle, I pulled the camera up and got a bunch of shots. And I like that one the best, where he's looking straight at me.
Absolutely. Do you
So there's
remember?
another lesson. Always have your camera.
Absolutely. Do you remember the shutter speed on this? I'm looking at the rain droplets. I
I
don't,
don't.
yeah, I don't have the access to the shutter speed. I'm going to put it at 1/500th of a second. So how's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like I love the challenge of trying to guess shutter speed based off of rain droplet size. So I'm going at 1/500th of a second on this one, but really moody. Love the stare. You know, it's interesting about red tails. You say that they're skittish, and I would agree with that. But one thing about red tail in this area, they're pretty common. You will sometimes come across individuals, and I guess it's the same with waterfowl. You know, depending on what they're used to. I had a red tail the last 3 years. I named Herman. He was always in the same geographic area, always on a perch. I have headshots of him. He would hunt right in front of me. He would stand on power lines. He was the most tolerant red tail I've ever experienced, and I think part of it was because his hunting area was right near an intersection, and there were cars always going past, and he was always used to cars stopping at the stop sign he was at. And so when you stopped your car, it was nothing new to him. He would just sit there and let you take his picture, and then he would, go about his day. So yeah, there's certainly variation within individuals of all species. You'll see waterfowl again. Wood ducks can be super, super wild. They can be a little bit tame. You can run across any species of duck that's used to people at a park that might be much, much different than if you go to a remote pond.
Yeah, that's right. I just looked up the EXIF data while you were talking
Okay.
there, and it was one thousandth of a second.
Oh, man, that's disappointing. All right.
And of
And
course, no matter what kind of bird it is, if you got red berries in the shot, it's
there you
it's a
go.
keeper.
With water droplets, it's a keeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you are. I'm putting up the range map for red tail. So for people that don't know, red tails are in every state in the United States at some point year round. So they're all over. I would assume that there are subspecies. If you ever want to do interesting research on red tails, look into the subspecies. So I would assume that what Collin sees on the West Coast is primarily Western subspecies. On the East Coast, we get Eastern subspecies. There's tons of subspecies all over the place. There's also a northern subspecies, and there's species specific to different land masses and islands. So it's a pretty interesting species in general, but it's one that I enjoy photographing.
And maybe for those listeners who are tuning in from outside of North America, I put a little red dot on the map to indicate where I live.
Yep. Yeah, I did show that as well. Now, oh, let me just ask a question. I've got the next image up, and this is I want to say this is an auklet. Is this? Am I right?
Yeah, it's a rhinoceros auklet.
Okay. I did not know the species. I've never seen any auklet, so this is out of my league. But before I get into that, I will say I'm looking at some of Colin's data, and I did notice a shift. So this says 7D. So I'm assuming Canon 7D is the model. The other ones did not. So are you a Canon shooter now?
No, Sony. Maybe this is a good time to I'll share my history.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go through that real quick. I'm going to keep this image up, and then we'll talk about it in a second. But let's go through what you shoot with in the past, and then currently what you're shooting with.
Well, like I said, it was about 10 or 12 years ago when I just decided to buy a camera, not necessarily to get into photography, but just to have a camera. Digital was really coming on, and so I bought what was it, a Panasonic FZ18, a bridge camera, or what they also call a super zoom. It was
Okay.
like 400 or 500 bucks, and I just instantly got the bug. I just fell in love with it. Like, starting to take a few pictures of this and that and the other, and I just was instantly hooked. So I used that for about a year or two, and then I sort of came to the limits of the tiny sensor that's inside, and upgraded a little bit to a micro four thirds camera. I used that for a couple of years. Actually, that's the one I took to Cuba. But I didn't know what I was doing. I was just shooting in JPEG mode, leaving it in auto. I didn't really know how to control the camera, and I wasn't really shooting birds either for the first, I don't know, 5 years or something. I was just generally going out and finding interesting things to shoot. And then I made the jump to a Canon 6D full frame body, but still just general shooting. And then, do you remember when Tamron came out with their first, what was it, the 150 to 600 lens?
That was the game changer.
That what it really was. And I
Yep.
just thought, oh, because I was sort of resigned to, like, I knew I probably wasn't going to spend 10 grand on a big birding lens. Uh, so when that thing came out, I just thought, oh, maybe I could get into birds.
Yep.
So I bought that. I think about the first one that came into Canada, and used that for a while. Then I realized that the 6D was not the appropriate birding body, so I bought a 7D2 and then a 5D4, and then I bought a 500 f4 lens and a 100 to 400 and a
And
bunch of other stuff. But anyway,
that's when you know the addiction is real when you get that first 500 prime, that first
yep,
500 F4. That's when you know, okay, I'm really putting money into this hobby, and you know you're serious about it.
yep. So I used that for a while, and then Nikon came out with that D850. And
Hmm.
that kind of haunted me for a while. I mean, you read all the reviews about how wonderful it was and increased resolution and this and that and the other. So I finally succumbed. I bought that and the Nikon 500 f4 and a smattering of other lenses. And you know what? Yeah, and I'm not one to sort of switch systems. I would have stuck with Canon if they would have, sort of delivered what we needed as bird photographers. Um, and then So what happened? I was with a friend, and he had the Sony A9 and the new 200 to 600, and so he let me try it, and I just couldn't believe the way the autofocus worked. I mean, the D850 was a lot better than the Canon, but this was just otherworldly. Like, it would just, for birds in flight, it would grab the bird and just not let go. It was almost like cheating.
Hmm.
So and yeah, and then I thought, well, they've also come out with this 600 f4, so I basically switched systems to Sony.
Okay, so you're shooting a Sony mirrorless system now.
Yep,
Okay.
the A9.
And which lens is that primarily? I know you probably have a couple, but are you do they have a 400 2.8?
They do, and that's, we saw Sony coming on strong for the last 5 years,
Hmm.
but for us bird and wildlife people, well, they didn't really have any glass, so who
Yep.
cares, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they did come out with that 400 2.8 a couple years ago, but I've never been drawn to that particular lens.
Okay.
Um, But yeah, when they came out just what was it, 6 months ago or whatever, with the 600 f4 and the
Hmm.
200 to 600, well, all of a sudden, I think a lot of people
Yeah.
started to take notice,
Yeah.
and I'm glad the old Nikon and camera, sorry, Nikon and Canon bodies, they seem a little archaic now compared to what the A9 will do.
Yeah, it's interesting and it's tough for somebody that's invested. Like, so for me, I still shoot Nikon, and when you invest in several $1,000s worth of glass, and then you talk about, well, when do I make a move to mirrorless? Do I wait for Nikon to catch up? Do I jump to Sony? It's a tough decision. I have some friends that jump. I think, when you're not doing it professionally, it's tough. It's a tough decision to make, especially when you're invested in something else. But really interesting. And the mirrorless advantages besides autofocus, do you find like silent shutter to be a big deal with bird photography? Because I think a lot of people are curious about that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that was one thing with the D850 that I noticed. I was actually scaring birds away.
Hmm.
The shutter is so
Oh
loud.
yeah, I'm shooting it.
It's like I called it the howitzer.
Yep.
Yeah, it would really startle them, if not scare them off entirely. And the Sony will do 20 frames per second total silent shooting, the
Yeah.
A9.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Um,
incredible when you're shooting, eagles or something like that. Nobody cares about your shutter. They're a pretty good
right.
distance away, and they're just going to fly in front of you. But when you're shooting, I really do pride myself on physical proximity to birds. So when I'm shooting warblers, I'm trying not to crop. Trying to literally get 12 feet. I chose a 400 2.8 because of the minimum focus. Like, I really do want to try to get 8 to 10 feet away. When you're that close and you start hammering down with the 850, you're making some noise.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting journey. Thanks for sharing kind of your story. If people have questions about that, go ahead and throw them in the comments. And when we get towards the end of the show, we'll try to answer some of those questions if you do have some about gear as well. Let's get
And
on.
two,
Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I find that Sony is doing something different too with their extenders. I bought both the 1.4 and the 2 times. And I mean, obviously, those are going to work well on the 600 f4, but they also work really well on the 200 to 600 zoom lens. And I don't think there's any other zoom lens out there that works well with extenders. And this thing, the focusing is still good. The images are still really sharp. I don't know what they're doing, but
Wow.
it's miles ahead of Canon
Yeah.
and Nikon.
It makes me curious enough to just invite somebody with a Sony to come shoot with me because I really do want to just get it in my hands and play around and see, what
Right.
that difference is. Let's talk about this auklet. So you've got it looks like a really good look at this thing. Eye level, lots of fish. How close?
Yeah, well, that actually brings up another little topic of the kayak. I got a little 10-foot plastic kayak
Hmm.
about 2 years ago, and that opens up a whole other realm of opportunities. Get out on the. I'm surrounded by ocean here, so
Hmm.
that was out in the ocean, taken from the kayak. Yeah, those birds are very, very shy, very hard to get near, and that was actually taken a long time ago with the Tamron 150 to
Oh
600.
wow.
I won't take a big prime out on the kayak. It's just too risky.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Plus
agree.
it's too big and cumbersome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was observing this guy. What they do is they'll dive down and they'll stay down for, I don't know, about a minute. As they catch all these needlefish, and then they'll pop back up again, and they just keep collecting them. And I guess they take them back to their nest and their
Hmm.
chicks or whatever. But so I knew I wasn't going to be able to get close to him, so I waited for him to go down, and then I just paddled like crazy to where he was,
Hmm.
and then I coasted, pulled up the camera, waited, and then he came up, and boom, I got him, and then he took off.
That's great.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of what you got to do with those birds.
Really interesting. And now those that species, I think is kind of a coastal. So you're only going to see these on the oceans. You're not really going to find this bird inland, right?
Oh, absolutely. Have you got the map up
I
there?
do. Yep.
Yeah, so that's where they're found.
Yep. And they breed. I think there are breeding. Yeah, this map actually shows a couple dots of breeding colonies. So I was going to say where you were, that bird was probably breeding nearby and like you said, taking those fish back to the nest.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Tell me about, now this is cute. So you've got this merganser. I always talk to people about how to, like, a couple concepts to take great images, and I lay out these three very basic principles, and then I always throw the fourth one in. And the fourth one is the storytelling or engagement always trumps everything else. So if you can tell a great story, or if it's cute, it will always beat sometimes light, perspective, and environment. So I think you've managed to do that with this Merganser.
Yeah, again, that was a few years ago. That was with the 72 and 500 f4, I think. Unfortunately, I was sort of shooting into the sun, so you can probably tell that from the little one there. But so it's kind of backlit. But yeah, I was just on the beach, and again, always have your camera. There they were, and I got down nice and low and rattled off a bunch. And I'm pretty sure I heard that little chick say, "I'm king of the world."
It's a great. I've seen the mergansers. Well, several duck species take these little rides on their mom, but I don't know. God, and I look at a lot of bird pictures. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen one standing like that and like facing the camera with the arms out. So pretty unique stuff. Really, really like that one. Merganser is a species that is pretty common both on both coasts and anywhere in the Northeast. I've got the range map up now. So they're probably I see them here year round. You probably see them there year round as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Excellent.
thrilled to get that. It was fun.
Now, the next one up is not a bird that many people ever get a chance to see. Let me pull up the range map on this one. You're going to see where Collin's located, and then you're going to see kind of the extent of their wintering limit, and that's the northern hawkowl. Now, I have never seen a northern hawkowl. Was this taken? And I guess they probably do in winter come down to your area. Did you have to travel for this, or was this local?
Well, I think a lot of people who are listening probably know exactly where this owl was. This was
Okay.
last winter, and it was just a very rare visit from that species to the greater Vancouver area on the mainland. And I think it was it was hanging around these blueberry fields, and it was catching a lot of food like voles and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it became very, very popular. There's a lot of photographers every day there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm talking 50 to 100 people.
Yeah.
So it was shot heavily, that bird. But it didn't seem to be bothered by people.
Yep.
It just did its own thing. Now the day I plan to go, I have to get on a ferry, and it's an hour and a half to get to Vancouver, and then another hour's drive to where it was. And the forecast was for snow. And I thought, the roads in Vancouver can be pretty crazy when it
Mm-hmm.
snows. And I don't have a four-wheel drive. I have a truck, but it's not four-wheel drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really, I almost didn't go, but I'm so glad I did because I got that snow shot and a bunch of others. I went over there twice actually. The second time was no snow, but I remember when I got there that morning, the snow was coming down super heavy. I got out of my truck and I, put on all my clothes, and it was really cold and windy, and you had to walk about a kilometer out to where the owl was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm walking with my big camera and a tripod and all my winter gear, big boots, into a headwind. I felt like Shackleton. And there was only like two guys out there that day.
Uh-huh.
And I got soaked and I almost hypothermic. I was so cold. And but I'm glad I went because I got some snow shots.
It's amazing, those experiences at the time. You're kind of in your head, especially for people who aren't making a living doing this. You think, "What the hell am I doing out here?"
Yeah.
But they are also, I was talking about this kind of concept the other day. While it is a beautiful image. Listen, I would story or not, this is a beautiful image. If this was in your backyard, you were out there for 5 minutes and got this image, it's beautiful. But personally, they mean so much more to you when you put in that time or that work, or you fought a little bit harder or hiked a little bit longer to get those images. And I snow always works. I mean, snow is just a great environment. Nice soft light on this. We're going to talk a little bit in a minute about some things that I noticed with your photography and some of your workflow. So I do want to touch on that as we get into a couple of these, the last half of your images. I've got the common loon up now. Is this kayak or is this on the shore? I would assume this is kayak.
No, this is from a fairly low lake boat, like what a lake fishing boat.
Okay.
Yeah, that was in the interior of BC
Yeah, beautiful
in the
image.
summer, of course. Um, I got to witness a rather heartbreaking moment with these guys. I don't know if it was this exact bird or not. I can't remember, but this was about 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, the the adult loons will generally not leave their chicks, but I came across this one area where I saw these two chicks alone floating in the water. I thought that's strange. And then I saw a bald eagle. And I thought, oh, this does not look good. And sure enough,
Oh
the
boy.
eagle started to do circles and get lower and lower. And the little babies, they're only like 3 days old, but
Mm.
they already knew instinctively to dive underwater. But I guess the eagle knew that, well, they've got to come up sometime. And long story short, he did snatch one out of the water. And then the parents came running in,
Hmm.
making all kinds of noise. And I guess what had happened was they went to chase off another adult loon. They really don't like each other.
Okay.
And so they made an exception, chased off this adult
Ah,
loon, and they paid the price.
that is, we always think like the cute in the pretty aspects of wildlife. There are some, yeah, you're out in the field long enough, you do see some things, and it can be very tough to watch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Let
was
me
heartbreaking.
Yeah, let me get on to the next one. This is Clark's or Western Grebe. I wish I knew my grebes over that way better. Western Grebe.
Yeah, that's a
Ah,
Western.
got it right. Okay. Um, really cool. Tell me first of all, where are you located in proximity to the bird, and anything different with this shot to capture? I mean, a really really neat shot.
Yeah, I that was up in Salmon Arm, BC, um, and taken from the shore.
Okay.
And that was with a Canon 5D4. I had a 2 times extender on, believe it or not,
On
um,
top of a 600 or 500.
500.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I was there. I was only there for 2 days, and I was a little bit late to see them do uh, their breeding ballet dance that
Yeah.
they do on the water. I missed that, and I was too late for that and too early to see any chicks. But I still got a bunch of neat images anyway, and this is probably the best one.
Yeah, very, very cool. Now, do you, when you're doing this, do you just kind of anticipate that they've gone down, they're probably going to come up with a fish, you're kind of getting ready?
Yeah, I saw this guy fishing, so I thought, well, let's see what happens here. Let's just stay focused on him.
Yeah. One of the nice thing with grebes in general, or any of the diving ducks, is a lot of times when they're super hyper focused on fishing, they're very tolerant of what's going on around them. So, I mean, I'm not saying stand up and run in the water and try to shoot them, but if you're laying on the shore side and you're kind of quiet and doing your own thing, if they're really engaged in this fishing, sometimes, and the other thing is they'll dive, and if the fish happen to be closer to the shore, they'll pop up right in front of you. I've had grebes pop up, 10, 20 feet in front of me, that started 50 or 60 feet in front of me.
Right.
Yeah.
And this actually might be a good opportunity to mention the one common thing with all these water shots is that it's just paramount to get your camera lens as low as possible.
Yes. Yep. Always
I just
talk
I'll
about
never
that.
ever shoot down on a bird anymore.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and there's certainly, we've done some shows on waterfowl and stuff like that, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but just the engagement alone. I mean, forget the backgrounds that you can get better separation and depth of field, but like just the engagement alone being that low and feeling like you're really on the water with that bird, it definitely makes a huge difference.
Yeah, you're in their world.
Yeah. Hey,
The same
let's.
is true for people who shoot pets,
Yep.
whether it's your own or there's some people do that professionally. But if you're ever taking a picture of your cat or your dog, never shoot down on them. Get
Yep.
right down at their level, and it's just a world of difference.
All right. I literally, I don't know if the audience saw this reaction. I clicked while you were talking to the next image, which is, I will admit, now at the end of the show, I picked some of my favorite images of Colin. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. He had put this in his top 10. I will tell you without a doubt, this is one of my favorite. When I clicked this, I literally jumped just now. When I look at this, this is so good, I almost don't like you. And that's a compliment. The colors on this duck are unbelievable. If you had a signature shot, now I like your songbirds a lot. We didn't show a lot of top 10 songbirds. I have some in my sequence, but this I want to take a minute and talk about a couple things with this, because when you talk about just a portrait, and there's nothing here, there's no action, there's no other bird coming in and hunting and fishing. This is just a straight up portrait, and the light is so perfect, and the colors are so amazing, and the detail is so good, and it almost looks, and I'm not insulting you, this is a compliment when I say it almost looks like you photoshopped the symmetry. That's how, like, absolutely perfect. Even the eye symmetry, and it's not the same. This isn't Photoshop, because you could see a difference in the left and right. Even the pupils are different. So the pupil on the one side is smaller than the pupil on the other side, because the light on the light side and the shade side is different. But it is absolutely stunning. One of my favorites of yours by far. What I would like to talk to you and take a minute to talk about with this image specifically is your attention to detail. And I mean that in two ways. I mean the attention, the emphasis you place on detail of the subject, and then the emphasis you place on detail in the editing process. So let's start with the subject. How important is that sharpness in detail to you?
Sharpness, yeah. Well, everybody loves sharpness.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm always trying to get something that's slightly different. And what I like about this one is that, um, I mean, it's what's the word? Anthropomorphism, where we
Yes.
imply a human attitude
Yep.
on an animal. He looks like he's just all business. He's very serious, maybe even angry. He's not, of course, but just that look,
Yep.
that, he's not going to take crap from anybody.
Yep. Yeah. You're absolutely right. When you edit, I don't want to say like how heavy handed, how comfortable are you in manipulating the image, and how much time would you put into an image like this? Because I can tell you, this is not what the raw file looks like. And I would take pride in that. I would, some people look at it as like, well, I like my images to look like out of camera. I argue with that all day long. I take pride in saying this polish that we put on our images takes a lot of skill. So typical, something like this, something you look at, you're proud of, it looks really good, it's a special image. How much time would you take in your workflow to do this?
I know what you mean, and obviously it really varies. But on that particular image, almost nothing. And a lot of that has to do with getting low. When you get super low like that, your background is just turned to butter,
Yep.
and you don't have to do anything.
Yep. And
There's no details to try and clean up. It's just that's pretty much, I might have darkened the blacks a tiny bit or something, but no, that one not much.
okay. And now when you're going through your entire workflow, do you use, I assume you use Photoshop.
Yeah, but I'm one of those guys who never jumped onto Lightroom, or the whole CC Creative Cloud suite.
Okay.
With my sign business, I bought the Adobe, what was it called? It was a whole suite. Design Standard, I think it was. This was
Okay.
like 7 years ago,
Hmm.
which included Photoshop, Illustrator, Acrobat, Bridge, and a few other things. It was a whole package. It was like $1,100, and that was actually that was CS5. And then about a year later, I had to upgrade another $500 to CS6. And then not long after that, they announced that they're no longer doing that, and it's all you have to pay monthly. So
Hmm.
I had no appetite to start paying monthly after paying all that money.
Right.
And so that's what I still use today is CS6. I also use Nick as a plugin
Okay.
for any noise treatment or anything like that. But yeah, just I never find that it doesn't, it does everything I need it to. Just a process in Adobe Camera Raw
Hmm.
into Photoshop,
Yep.
fine tune everything, save it as a master JPEG. I don't save it as a TIFF. I don't save it as a Photoshop file because those files are just so huge.
Okay.
And there's just no need for them for me anyway. I just save one big master JPEG and that's it. I
And
keep the raw file forever, of course. But
okay. And if you go out shooting, so let's say you go out and you shoot 100 images or 1,000 images, what percentage of those do you actually just right out of camera just delete, and how many do you keep as potential?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. I don't keep track of that, but I think most of us probably delete 90%,
Okay.
because oftentimes you are using burst mode,
Hmm.
and because the bird's moving around so much, you simply cannot wait for that magical moment. Otherwise, you'll miss it.
Here's where you can tell the hoarders. So I'm not a hoarder, but I have this thing about throwing away stuff that sometimes I'm like, ah. So I do this weird thing where I rate the files, and I probably have the same percentage of keepers, like 10%, 20% that I like. But then I'll delete a bunch. But then there's like this middle road that I just convert to JPEG, and because it doesn't take up much memory, so I just convert all the raws to JPEG and save them. I don't know why I do that. I'm never going to look at them again. At some point, I'll have to get past this, but I know it's just me. Like it's a psychological thing about burning that file. But yeah, it's interesting to hear people's thought process, though. I know some people that are very comfortable culling down to, like you said, just delete, delete, delete. I know some people that save every raw file, like from a shoot, and I'm like, I don't know where you get the memory for that because it's a lot of storage space.
Yeah, their basement's full of hard drives.
Yeah. All right. And then, oh, this is the last one, and then I'm going to pop up my 10. We're perfect on time, so we'll have some time for questions at the end. And I want to talk about the. So this is bush tits. I've seen them. I've never photographed them. Are these common in your area, West Coast in general?
They are, and feel free to pop up the map there.
Yep.
I'm so glad I'm within their northern limit, because they're probably one of my favorite little birds.
Mm-hmm.
They are so small. They're smaller than a ping pong ball, and they probably weigh less than a piece of popcorn.
Yeah.
And they're so cute. Those are two females, actually. The females have a yellowish eye, and the males have a very dark eye.
Okay.
I've got shots with a male and a female together. That's pretty exciting. But they're very difficult to get. They're kind of like a kinglet, where they
Mm-hmm.
they just don't stop moving for a second. They're always moving around. And they fly around the neighborhood in groups of, 10, 20, 30, and they really like suet. And so they'll come into the yard for, I don't know, a few minutes, and then they all just disappear.
Mm-hmm. So they're social. Like if you see one, you probably see a few. Like kinglet. Sometimes, if you see one, there's probably a bunch hanging around.
Oh, even more so. They definitely stick together in groups.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Now I've seen a few in all a little different look. So it's not like it didn't look like they were all shot the same day. But um, when you are thinking about any species, in this, for example, would you say you had it when you're thinking about the environment? Small in frame. Tight headshot. Like, where do you see yourself comfortable, or do you try to vary that within your portfolio?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that I like to get in really tight.
Okay.
I've had to recently force myself to try and get back up a bit for those environmental shots.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you my opinion here.
Go ahead.
Given that everybody seems obsessed with their smartphones these days, I'm not one of those people. I use a 30-inch monitor, and I'm a desktop guy.
Hmm.
I'm the only reason I use my smartphone is for Instagram, because it's, smartphone based. Um, when you think about the evolution of the screen back in the 40s and 50s, when televisions first came out, the screens were what, 8, 10 inches, then 12 inches, then 14. And then through the 60s and 70s, TVs got bigger and
Hmm.
bigger and bigger. And then flat screen TVs, they got bigger and bigger. And then, not too long ago, people were making their dedicated home theater rooms with 8-foot screens. And a similar sort of thing has happened with the computer screens. They've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep.
And then it seems almost overnight that people are content with their smartphone. And I pulled out my measuring tape the other day. The screen is just over 2 inches wide.
Yep.
So I don't. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that the environmental shots, I think they're great, but they need to be viewed really big,
Yep.
like on a big screen or a big print.
Yep.
When I see an environmental shot on a smartphone, it's like there's just no impact. It just doesn't serve the image very well.
Yeah, I would
Whereas
agree.
whereas if you get in tight, well, and fill the screen,
Yep.
then the smartphone, it, looks great.
Yep, I agree, and it's tough. I'll post some images that with maybe a bird a little bit smaller in frame on Instagram, and I kind of cringe because I'm like, nobody's gonna like this. And at the end of the day, I try not to let the audience decide what I post. I try to post what I like. So I'm gonna put it up anyway, but I just kind of know it's not gonna go over real well. You're right. That small screen does not do you any favors when you're portraying those smaller in frame birds. There are sometimes there's certainly exceptions to that. I think there's some people who do such a good job with color, and the color palette is so strong that even though the bird, it's almost like looking at a landscape. The bird happens to be there, but it's such a beautiful landscape that it kind of all works together. And sometimes silhouettes can work in these small devices, but they certainly don't lend themselves. Today's viewing audience does not lend itself to that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I find too that most people, so I find this especially on Facebook, I find a lot of people will comment where, I mean, in their day-to-day lives, even if they do a lot of nature walks or, birding or whatever, they never really do get to see a bird up close. And so we're bringing that bird to them in a such a detailed way that they have never ever seen before. I hear that comment a lot.
Hmm.
And even myself, one time I was in my backyard in a blind, and I just happened to get a really tight headshot of a northern flicker type of woodpecker. And when I was looking at it later on the screen on the computer, I saw feather detail that I've never seen before. So I don't know. I just like getting right up close and getting all that detail.
All right. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run through. I don't know if it's 10, but I've got a few images. I'll move through them pretty quickly. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a surprise because you don't know which ones they are, and you can't see them. So what I'm going to do is describe them to you. I did pick one of your uh, bush tits as well. This one's perched at an isolated branch all by itself. I didn't know the females had yellow eyes, so I can tell you this is a female. You do an exceptional job with these portraits, and they look studio lighting. I gotta imagine you just kind of prefer these soft overcast days to shoot because there's no way this is direct hard sunlight.
Right. I try to avoid that because
Good.
you're gonna get blown out highlights and
Yeah.
stuff. Plus, too, even if there is some unfavorable lighting conditions, I'm constantly adjusting my exposure compensation
Hmm.
depending on what the background is and so on and so forth.
And you do not use flash in any of your work, or do you use it in some?
Right. No, I don't use flash.
All natural light.
That's actually one of my weaknesses. I wish I was really good at flash, but I'm not. Um, there's been times where in the Pacific Northwest here, the days are so dark, especially in the winter, where you've got to add something. So I got this. I don't know how to describe it, like a workshop light. It's like a square box. It's just
Hmm.
a light for maybe a body shop or something. And I'll stick that on the ground and put a little bit of light on the subject because it's just so
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah.
But
The next one I'm showing is very similar in terms of the lighting. Is a Stellar's Jay that's leaning sideways. So I just thought it was a really neat look, kind of classic, Colin. It's got that really nice light, close image, a lot of detail. The perch has some interest, which I thought was really neat. I've got another wood duck that I put into mine. This is one where he's resting his head on his body. It's the male. Again, looking straight at it, I liked your top 10 version better than the one I picked, to be fair, but I did think this was one of your more stunning. I've got a hooded merganser. This is a female, really, really tight headshot. I think this is, I don't want to say fairly recently, but I remember you posting it within the last couple months, it seems like, because I remember when it was posted just thinking, wow, that is a heck of a headshot. Again, really soft light. That crest, that hood is just illuminated a little bit at the top and along the edges. I thought that was really, really special. Um, I added a frog into my top 10, believe it or not. And guess what? It's small in frame, Colin. So I've got this, I don't know species of frogs for anything, but it's on a bent blade of grass.
yeah, I
And
don't know what I was thinking. I should have got in tight.
oh, no, no, absolutely not. This is gorgeous. The leading line and that curve, and again that classic light that is kind of throughout your portraits. I thought this was an outstanding image. And let me just get through a couple more. Somebody actually mentioned, Cynthia said, Colin is the king of chestnut backed chickadee. And guess what? It was one of my top. I have a chestnut backed chickadee here perched on a set of pine cones. So there's three pine cones, and it's kind of got its legs on two of the pine cones. You do use it. Is this a backyard type species for you? Is this something that just kind of comes into the yard?
Yeah, they are here in great numbers all year round.
Okay.
They don't look so, they look kind of shabby in the summertime, but in the winter they look really nice. And oh yeah, they're just, they're the, you can put your hand out with some seed and they'll land on your hand sometimes.
So this is one of those species, and I don't think you do. You're not one to just shoot backyard perches. Like you'll go out in the field, but you don't mind mixing up a little bit with, like I would assume. I mean, just based off the composition, that this is probably just something in your backyard you're playing around with.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes it's great just to stay home. You don't have to drive anywhere. And I mean, if I'm out in a slightly rural area on a 3rd acre property, and my backyard is quite birdy, so I'm kind of spoiled that way. But it's nice because you can select a perch and place it so that the background is far away, so
Hmm.
everything's blown out, and you get really nice subject isolation. And just shoot away at home. You scatter some seed down, the birds come in. It's great fun. But yeah, I'd say that's probably about 10 or maybe 20% of my shooting.
Okay. Yeah, and certainly the waterfowl. You're not shooting setups in your backyard. That's what I've got up now. Is that male hooded merganser that you posted? This is an older image, maybe over a year, and it's got its beak. You probably know the one I'm talking about. It's a yellow background. The beak is open, really tight headshot. It looks like you're 5 feet away from this thing. Do you recall? Like, are you cropping these significantly? Are you? The detail looks like you're on top of it. The detail is unbelievable in this. I can see every feather in the hood. So you've got to be close.
Yeah, I mean, like all of us, we try to minimize the cropping. That was one nice thing about the D850, so much resolution that gives you a lot more croppability. But yeah, I can't remember which image you're talking about exactly. I can't see it on screen, but
Okay.
that's one thing about these big lenses, especially if you use an extender, um, helps you fill the frame.
Yeah. Yeah. This one I'll show it to you later just to remind you. But I didn't see a whole lot from this series, but it's one with the mouth open and the yellow eye is echoed in the background colors. And that's one of the things that really drew me to this. If you were to take your eyedropper tool and select some of these tones in the background, and then you'd go into the eye, I swear to you, it's like the exact same color. It's really, really, really interesting and really well done.
Hmm,
The last one I had up. This is it's a dark eyed junco. Now it's a little bit different than our subspecies on this side. So you've got a different subspecies over there. But the thing I loved about this one, and maybe you'll know, you've got a few juncos in your account, but this is also an older image. It's got this super curvy branch, like the perch actually goes all over the place, up and down. Uh, Really beautiful background with two tones of dark green and light green. It looks like it might have just rained because the perch looks kind of wet, but I really, really like this one. But I especially loved this perch more than anything. It was just really, really super interesting.
yeah, and that's one thing to keep in mind. It's good to match the perch to the size of the bird. You don't want a tiny bird on a great big
Hmm.
fat stick, and you don't want a larger bird on a really tiny skinny.
Hmm.
So you got to find what bird's coming in and choose the right perch.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that was the last one that I had. So just, really, first of all, as far as time, we're just about to the 1 hour limit. I try to keep this to 1 hour. So I'm just going to glance down. I didn't see a whole lot of questions come in. So as I'm finishing up, let me just put out a reminder to the team. If you have any questions for Colin, we've got him on for a few more minutes. Go ahead and put him in the chat window. I'll relay those questions to him. We'll try to see if he has some answers for us. In the meantime, let me just thank everybody for jumping in tonight. Uh, I know it's kind of an interesting time that we're in right now. I appreciate you taking some time out of your weekend to jump in. I know weather was nice on the East Coast. On the West Coast, it's still early enough. Some people are out there shooting. Just a reminder on a couple other things that I have on the Wildlife Inspired channel. So on this channel, I'm starting to do some 10-minute videos. Feel free to check those out. Oh, Colin, I forgot to ask you about back. My last one was on back button focus. My next one's going to be about some attributes that make a great wildlife photographer. But back button focus, yes or no?
Absolutely.
All right. Oh man, I wish we had more time. I would have loved to have talked to you about back button focus. Shoot, I got to try to I'm going to ask every guest from now on back button focus. I know you and Simon are yes. And I think I had the other two were no. So I think I'm 50-50 on back button focus so far. But yeah, I wish we had more time. Let me see
No,
if
I generally won't talk to people who don't use back button focus.
if I would have known that before the show, I would have found somebody else. Oh, yeah, just a lot of compliments coming in. So somebody did ask about, you have lots of great perches. Are some of those planned or are they all in the field? So just real quick answer to that.
Yep, some are definitely planned. The backyard stuff.
Okay.
Again, my whole point is to just create as most beautiful images as I possibly can.
Yep.
And when you can control that in your yard, why not?
Yep.
Even out in the field, I try to get really picky too. I'll find a perch that's fairly isolated,
Mm-hmm.
and then wait for the bird to show up. But
yeah, one thing I really hope that comes through as we're doing these talks is, it's as a host who does this and enjoys it. I have a certain style, and one thing I just constantly try to communicate out, and I hope that message gets out, is that there is no right or wrong style, and just because the way I shoot is a certain way, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I love Colin's work. I don't do I'm showing a couple perches. Your last two, you've got a Townsend's warbler that you just posted on Instagram, chestnut-sided chestnut back chickadee that you posted. These are images that are just gorgeous, and I love them. It may not be the way I shoot, but it doesn't make it right or wrong. And so I'm trying to get a variety of guests on with different styles, somebody who might shoot small in frame or might have a tendency to be more environmental, and then show you somebody who does really great work with portraits and let you figure it out as an audience. So I hope that comes through in all of my videos. Check out some of those 10-minute videos that I've got, one on back button focus and one on myths of bird photography. I'm coming up with another one probably in a few weeks. I did have a vacation plan. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to that because of what's going on in the country right now, but that's pretty much where I'm at. Also, my Patreon site, check that out. If you go to patreon.com, one of the good things right now is I've got a really nice group of followers and a really beautiful community. I don't know if I have any mentorships available right now, but there is some extra videos. So for example, I just went out with some wood ducks and a grebe, and I actually do some videos out in the field. So while I'm out in the field, I'll record what I'm doing and my thought process. So it's a much deeper dive than this show is. So if you're interested kind of at next level, I've also got some archived episodes of Wildlife Inspired that are only available on Patreon. So be sure to check that out. Colin, I think we're at the hour limit. Perfect session. No technical difficulties, on time. We had a really nice audience today. We peaked over 50 viewers. So really, really excited. And your images were really gorgeous. And by the way, you did a great job using Skype for the first time. So congratulations. Anything you want to?
Scott.
Yeah.
I'm one of these guys I don't do video at all, and I obviously don't have a YouTube channel. So we all really appreciate guys like you who do this sort of thing.
Yeah. All right. And thanks for coming on. All right. So with that, Colin, I'm going to say good night to you and mute this. And then I'm going to play a little exit and wish everybody a good day. So Colin, thanks for coming on and have a great day.
Thank you, Scott.
And for the rest of the viewers out here, thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Hope you have a wonderful night, and we'll talk to you soon.